There's a raging debate all across America about manly men versus what some people would like to see as more sensitive men. And then, of course, there are trans men. It's so confusing. It's hard to figure out where on the scale that you would put men. So, to help us figure it out, we've invited Taki Theodoracopulos. Theodoracopulos. Taki, you want to tell me your last name?
Yes, but I just go by Taki, but Theodoracopulos.
Theodoracopulos. And do you know that that means gift from God? I like that. I'm sorry I butchered it. I practiced it several times, and
That's all
I,
right.
I was had higher expectations. But you're a graduate of the University of Virginia. You now live in Switzerland, and you have written a book that is getting a lot of traction. It's called "The Last Alpha Male: The Amorous Pursuits and High Life of Poor Little Greek Boy." I don't know who that would be, but maybe it's a self reflection. I'm not sure. Welcome to the truth, Taki.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, what do you think about where men are supposed to be? I mean, I think we've always celebrated rough, tough men, the alpha male, as you put it. What is happening in our culture, in our society, that really says that men are supposed to be more sensitive today?
I think that men have always been more sensitive. I mean, more sensitive than they're presented to be today. But I think strength is now suspect. In other words, if you're very fey and very weak, you women might like you more. I think it's the contrary. Women are not fools. A lot of men have overdone it throughout the years. But when I was growing up, when I was formed as a man had to be extremely polite to women, extremely gallant toward a woman, and of course, if there was danger, he would be in the forefront. Now that's, I mean, that old cliche that when a lady comes near the table, of course you stand up, and women now complain about that. I find outrageous.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, isn't politeness a two-way street? What about when some women are just not very nice to men? I experience it myself from time to time, and that makes it kind of hard to respond with politeness. Are we supposed to just take it on the chin?
I'm afraid we have to take it on the chin. We have to take it on the chin because I mean, I think what brought all this on, this feminine mystique and all the feminist movement, it all came from men overdoing things. But there's a big difference between gentlemen and what is considered a gentleman today. Gentlemen in the past, we all felt that you had to protect a woman, you had to put her in a pedestal, you had to be very polite to her, and that didn't mean to be a weenie or to take advantage of a woman. We all tried to take advantage of a woman physically because we adored women. If a man adores a woman, it doesn't mean he has to hold her down. He just pursues her relentlessly, like Casanova did, like Don Giovanni did, the mythical Don Giovanni, like Gianni Agnelli did, like Porfirio Rubirosa did, all these famous playboy lovers. But that didn't have anything to do with oppressing a woman or making her feel uncomfortable. And this has become now, I hear, I'm very old now, and I'm sort of retired from that game. That's why I refer to myself as a poor little Greek boy. But I just find that men today are just, young people today are so afraid of being accused of anything that they've stopped pursuing women. I think it's a joke. And I've written this in my column this week for the American Conservative. A friend of mine, son, said to his father, who lives in England, Bismarck, famous German family, and he said to him, half of the girls I've met in school burst into tears when they read a comic book. The other half are, sort of tough, screaming women. So, I said, that's an obvious exaggeration. There are still very normal American young women who adore men and who are feminine and all that. Of course, there are. But he was making a point. He was shocked they're either too emotional or too aggressive. And I think Hollywood has a lot to answer for that because in Hollywood, men did take advantage of women for years and even bragged about it. I mean, the couch, the couch, what it was called,
The
where you
casting
take a truck,
couch.
the casting couch, was invented in Hollywood. That is probably the most awful, thing. It's like, um, Middle Ages having the breaking you on the thing. But anyway,
I get what you're saying. I have always sort of questioned the legitimacy, obviously, of the casting couch, but I wonder where the men's culpability stops and the woman's personal responsibility begins. I've had really mixed feelings about the late Kobe Bryant when he was accused of rape, and he took a woman back to his room at 11:30 at night. Now, if I am the female, I would think, it's 11:30. Here's a tall, athletic, good-looking guy inviting me back to his room at 11:30. Is my expectation really that we're just going to watch the Tonight Show?
you're absolutely right. But if you say that today, there'll be people, women, writing for the New York Times, female columnists, who will say, "What a pig you are for saying that." It's obvious a young athlete with a girl at 11:30 at night. What was she doing in his room? But of course, I say this, which is almost impossible to ascertain, and it's easy for me to say. But if a woman says no to me, I will accept that, even at 11:30 and slightly drunk in the hotel room. If she says no, no has to be no.
Well, let me just make it clear that I do not in any way support or condone the assault of any human being, man or
Sure.
woman. And the Me Too movement was a rage in America 10 years ago, and it cost so many men their
Yeah.
careers. And now
Sure.
I don't defend any male who sexually abused or took advantage of a female, but I have to believe that some men were falsely accused, and it was not about rape or sexual activity, but rather about just undermining them. And maybe money was involved, or maybe it was politics, or maybe it was just, I don't like that guy, I'm going to get him.
Ron, you are absolutely right because don't forget that the old proverb that may 1,000 guilty people go free rather than an innocent man to go down. So we forgot that maxim because I think there's been a lot of people who have been accused and have been condemned by society, lost their jobs, who it was purely money grubbing person who accused him. It's very easy to accuse. It's happening right now. I've been in, I finally been in the news lately because I wrote a column for the Spectator. I never met this person. I wrote a column saying exactly how he operated and who he was blackmailing, and the
Mm.
lawyers killed it. But I managed to get some of it next to the Sunday Times, where I also was a columnist at the Sunday Times in London.
Well, who was the guy? That wouldn't have been Jeffrey Epstein, would it?
Epstein, Epstein, yes, it was, and he he asked to meet me from a woman who's now married to my nephew, and I said I don't want to meet this guy. He's a blackmailer and a scumbag, and I would never I don't go near people like that. She said, "Well, these are all rumors." Well, Anyway, I wrote a column, then a follow-up column. It was the only one in 43 years that I worked, 46 years that I worked for the Spectator. They killed it. The lawyers killed it, and anyway, it's a pity.
So how long ago was that article written?
That was before before he went, after he went to jail the first time in Palm Beach,
Yes.
before 2000, so it was about 2015 or maybe even earlier, before he went to jail. I think I can't remember because, at my age now, everything seems. But I remember the whole column, and I said to the lawyers, "I'll take responsibility. I'll defend the libel case. I'll sign a paper right now." They said we can't. It's too, and I got everything right, and parts of it appeared, and it was leaked the other day. A friend of mine sent with this new things that came out. It says Taki wrote this and this and that. Anyway, very briefly, I was at dinner about 2 months ago at a Greek shipowner's house, a childhood friend, 75 years of friendship. On my right was a man called Leon Black, I found very unpleasant,
Mm.
and I was just as unpleasant. And the whole conversation, it was very difficult to speak. But the idea that this shark, who was on my right 2 months ago, this shark and a wizard of stocks and business needed Jeffrey Epstein, who had never done anything on his own, and paid him all these millions to advise him. That simply doesn't hold water. Epstein was providing him with women and whatever else, and he was blackmailing a very, apparently I've never met him, but a very prominent, very married, and very religious Jewish tycoon who obviously liked men too. So he was blackmailing him. That's how he started. Those rumors were around before anybody had ever heard of Epstein. So now he ruined the British royal family, which is no loss. But it goes to show how a person like that can get away with murder for as long as he did.
Well, so let me ask you, do you think that Jeffrey Epstein was just an immoral person who liked to engage the company of underage women, or do you think that there was something far more sinister going on with the operation that he was obviously conducting in all across America, from New York to New Mexico, Palm Beach, and then in the Caribbean? I mean, what?
Paris and London, Buckingham Palace. I think his genius was he knew human nature is weak, and he picked only on important, famous people. And just because you're able to make billions in the stock market, or you're born a royal prince like that buffoon Andrew was, doesn't mean that you have the moral strength or the intelligence to see through a person like that.
You think it was just about sex? You don't think that there was anything, politically involved with that? You don't
I
ascribe
wouldn't
uh,
know. I wouldn't know.
well, the when Acosta was being confirmed as for a position that required Senate confirmation, they asked him point blank, "Why did you go easy on Epstein?" And his response was, "I was told to because he was intelligence." I mean, if that doesn't
Yeah.
tell you everything, I don't know what does. You're not buying that, or
Don't forget that people like Bill Gates, people like Larry Summers, when they were young, when I was 18 and I learned every trick in the Riviera chasing, because I played polo with Ruby and I was under the influence of Gianni Agnelli, I learned how to handle myself with ladies, with women, with those guys were busy creating what they did, Microsoft and suddenly at 40 or 45, they're there with this pimp like person who provides them with everything. So I felt bad for those guys. I don't feel very sorry for multi-billionaires ever, but they were like children. And suddenly they're meeting girls 14 years old. Can you imagine? And they're themselves sexually, they're probably 15 or 16, although they're in their 60s or their 50s. I felt bad about this guy.
I can just tell you from my own personal experience. I worked at a very upscale, world renowned resort when I was in college, and there are
Mhm.
just certain things that you don't do in life. You don't put your finger in a electric socket.
Yeah.
You don't drive intoxicated, and for me, I would not even look at anyone that was under the age of 18 or 19 because I understood the risk. And if I
Yeah.
thought that it just wasn't worth it. And, you get a couple of cocktails and you're at a bar. And if the
Yeah.
person's underage, it's just an invitation for disaster. And
A
so,
disaster.
if you're 40 and you're in that position, shame on them, I mean, how could anyone live with themselves if they took advantage of someone that was underage, really? Or, my line of demarcation for dating at that point was 21. I mean,
21. Yeah.
I
Sure.
wasn't going to be even accused of buying a beer for somebody that was
Yeah.
underage. It's
Sure.
playing with fire.
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree. There's not a scintilla of doubt in my mind that you're completely right. But the flesh is weak, and I'm not going to feel sorry for Bill Gates or Bill Clinton, but they were like children, and he managed to manipulate them.
I would think they could go to any public establishment and pick out anybody they wanted
Sure,
to.
sure,
They
you
didn't
think
need
so?
Jeffrey Epstein to be their pimp. I don't understand it. I guess the flip side of that is if I'm just playing devil's advocate for the sake of playing
Yeah,
devil's advocate,
right.
I would imagine that they live a pretty cloistered life. I mean, the
Yeah,
fact of the matter is
sure.
they really can't go to a bar, which, fame, if you get it, I mean, do you really want it? Is it the dog that catches the car? Because
Sure,
every move you make is under scrutiny. And so
sure.
maybe
You're absolutely right.
maybe it is
Yeah,
repressive in some sense, but
yeah,
that,
yeah,
that all
yeah.
leads us back to the question of, um, is this healthy for all the sexes to in, influence and demean men in such a way that they cannot be the stronger sex, if you will.
Thanks. Of course not.
But,
Of course it is.
God made us stronger.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's
Well,
just an absolute reality. I mean, my
yeah,
wife is as athletic as anybody I've ever known, but she can't add muscle. She just can't,
sure,
and I don't want her to. But,
sure.
I guess some women have more perhaps, lower, estrogen or more
No,
testosterone.
but you should tell that to that Moroccan or Algerian boxer who won a gold medal, who was a biological man, who knocked out that poor Italian girl in the first 10 seconds.
It's
I
just
mean,
so wrong.
it's so wrong. It's so outrageous.
I
The
saw
Olympics
Riley
and
Gaines 3 weeks ago and
yeah,
heard her
it,
talk. She is a delightful person, by the way,
delightful.
just as real and down to earth as they come, and she said that, she had spent most of her life in the swimming pool preparing for the
Of
Olympics,
course.
and she was in
Exactly.
an Olympic trial event sponsored by the NCAA. She looked on the platform next to her, and damned if it wasn't a dude in a woman's
I know.
bathing suit. She said her first reaction was repulsion, and her second reaction was, I'm going to beat this SOB. And she swam as hard as she could swim. They miraculously touched the wall at the exact hundredth of a second. The NCAA said in swimming, there are no ties. We have to award the trophy, and it goes to this beast. God,
I know.
what has happened to our society?
Riley Gates is a heroine, and she's wonderful because she was the first one to expose the Pennsylvania guy who was a mediocre swimmer in the men's, and then switched to women, and they accepted it. It's so outrageous. I'll tell you very quickly. When I was in Virginia, I played a man called Dick Raskin. He beat me because we played on cement. And then, of course, it was a very close match. I remember when we shook hands, he was at Yale and I was at Virginia. We shook hands. I said, well done. I said, boy, to myself, if I played him on clay, because I was a clay court player, we'd see the result. Anyway, now this man became a woman called Renee Richards.
Yes.
She's an ophthalmologist. She's still with us. And she was a lousy player. I was on the circuit, but I was a lousy player. She was, let's say, we were about the same. And she won a tournament. She was sort of middling, almost to the top of women's. So it goes to show the difference. Left-handed Dick Raskin became Renee Richards, and suddenly she was in the top, I would say, 50 of. It's a joke, and tennis is not as doesn't depend on strength. And still, a man will always. I used to hit with Althea Gibson a lot in '57 in Rome on clay, and we never played a match because in those days you were ashamed to. But we were, I would say, we were almost close. She won Wimbledon that year. She was the first black woman to win Wimbledon. We were friends, and we used to hit together every day, Foro Italico, and and I was on the bottom of the rung of the circuit, and she was the top. So you can imagine.
Wow, what a great experience you had. So, were you on the professional tennis circuit then?
Well, there was no professional in those days. We all traveled together. There was no professionals. Were like an exhibition. Pancho Gonzalez who turned professional, Tony Traben later on, but the circuit then was it was called amateur because the top players like Roy Emerson, Rod Laver took not money but expenses underneath the table. Rabbits, as we were called, like me on the bottom of the rung, would get either free, not hotels. They used to put us up at homes, at houses,
Mm.
and don't forget, tournaments in those days were played in country clubs, and in country clubs it was full of very pretty girls, and of course they watched tennis, and that's why tennis was my favorite sport. But it was great fun traveling. We all were all. Nobody had a masseur. Nobody had a strategist. Nobody had a trainer. No, we hit with each other. I remember hitting with Lou Holt just before the final at Wimbledon. He won it twice in a row. He asked me, "Let's go and get a hit." He was wonderful. Then he became professional, of course. Djokovic, I think, has 25 people who travel with him all the time, nutritionists and masseurs and strategists. In those days, you just ask your next buddy, what am I doing wrong? And they will tell you.
Mm.
It was wonderful
Mhm.
life. And it finished in '67 when the game became open, became professional. But I had a very good time with all those wonderful players. The Australians were great and South Africans. It was fun. And we traveled around and had a lot of fun.
Well, I bet you did, and you probably continue to.
Now,
I love tennis. I was an avid golfer for 30 years, and I just got so frustrated as I aged. My hip
mm,
started hurting, and I couldn't turn, and my
really,
game
really,
went down the toilet. So I moved on to tennis. Most people do just the opposite. And I played tennis 4, 5, 6 times a week for an hour and
you
a half or
do?
2 hours at a time, and I love it. I just can't seem to improve my game. I don't know if I've aged out or not, but I'm gonna keep trying. I read the other day that if the people who play tennis can actually live 5 years longer than those who don't.
Well, they say that. I think golf is a tougher game, but I'll tell you one thing about tennis. It changed completely when these new rackets and the new technology changed the game because the hardest hit ball ever was Pancho Gonzalez, who hit it at 97 miles an hour serve. Now they're hitting 145 miles an hour. In those days, the reason why tennis was not popular was because nobody could play it. If you hit the ball too hard, it went out. If you didn't hit it hard enough, it went to the net. It was very difficult to play, and you needed touch and great soft hands, as they call them, to play the game. Now you see people going like this, and the ball goes in. It's amazing what the new technology did. In the old wooden rackets and dead gut, it was much more difficult, but it made the game very popular, and it's fun to play now.
So, what would your parting word be to a young man today struggling to figure out how to fit in and get along in our culture?
Always remind anybody who challenges you that being a gentleman means protecting a woman, being chic and being courteous toward a woman, and not allowing anybody to 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 do anything to her, but at the same time uh, to keep your pride and your ego and remind people that men were brought in this world to protect women and to make love to them. They didn't come here to be abused by them. And of course, it goes without saying, you never abuse a woman. And you, as they say in French, You never touch a woman who doesn't want to be touched, even with a rose.
That is wonderful parting advice. Taki Theodoracopulos.
Very well.
What a pleasure to have you on The Truth today.
Well, I want to thank you, John, very much for having me on your program, and thank you very much.
Well,
And,
we
and
look
I hope
forward to having you again. And the book, it's a must read, I think, for especially for younger guys. The Last Alpha Male, The Amorous Pursuits and High Life of a Poor Little Greek Boy. I'm not sure about the poor part, but that's okay.
thank you,
He's in
John,
Switzerland right now, snow skiing.
and all the best.
Thank you, Taki. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you. All the best to you. Bye.